Students of Swift, this is Prof G, and this is not one of our standard polished learning videos. Instead, it's an exam solutions video. And I put these together as quickly as possible to get them out to the students as soon as they're done taking their exam. Now, I'll show each portion of each exam question beforehand, so feel free to pause the video if you want to try this on your own. My students typically have 2 of these apps they have to build in a 2.5-hour exam. The exams are hands-on. They use their laptops in class. And one of the toughest things for me to do as an educator is to develop grading assignments, knowing that when you write code on your own, you're going to be able to pull up past code examples and consult the internet. But I actually limit the help that students can consult on the exam to just an 8.5-inch by 11-inch piece of paper. Both sides, they can put whatever they want on there, code examples and things like that. Now, the reason that I do that, they can't open up their old code example files, things like that. They can't look at Stack Overflow. They can consult any help that's built into Xcode, though. And the reason that I do this is because my students are going to have to take code interviews where a certain amount of recall level knowledge is expected. So I hope that this strikes a balance between, the stuff that they actually have top of mind as well as being able to consult prior work that they've done. And so far, it seems to work well. My students are regularly hired by top firms. So this is the app that they're going to build. This one is called the FriendsGiving app. In the US, it's increasingly popular to have a party before Thanksgiving that's just your friends instead of your family. It's called FriendsGiving. So this app keeps track of who's attending. You can enter what they're bringing. You can keep notes like who not to sit next to each other or if anybody has allergies. And this app is similar to other apps that they've built in class, most notably the to-do list app. Students should build this using an MVVM architecture. They pass data back and forth between views. They add new records or update data on existing records. They should be able to delete and reorder records as well. So with that said, let's build this bad boy. I'm thankful you're joining me. So I always offer an overview of what students are going to be building, and I have resources for them to download and put in the assets catalog. They should create an Xcode project called FriendsGiving, and I want them to rename the content view to list view. So those are the first 3 items. Let's do it. Create a new Xcode project, call this FriendsGiving. This is a Swift UI app because this is for my Swift UI course. And I want students to use the assets that they downloaded, so I give them a URL for that to put in an app icon on a launch screen. To add the app icon, they just click on the app icon asset, and they drag the icon over into the 1024 by 1024 box. Then we'll grab and highlight all these other assets, drag them into the assets catalog, and let go. This one called launch screen is going to be the launch screen for the app. I'm going to highlight and copy the name just so that I don't have to retype it, and I know I'm not going to make any typos. Then I'll click on the blue project icon. With target selected, I'm going to head to the info tab. I can expand the launch screen line in this info P list here. I don't need the UI launch screen. That's for UI kit, so I'm going to highlight and delete that. But here in the launch screen cell, I'm going to move over to the right and click on the little circle that has a plus sign inside of it. I'll select this option with image name, and then in the rightmost cell, I'll double click in there, and then I'll paste in launch screen, which is the name of my launch screen. Then just to make sure that things show up inside the safe area and they're not distorted, I'm going to click on the little circle with the plus sign again, and I'm going to add this item that says image respects safe area in sets. So press return on that, and then over here on the right-hand side, we want to click in the cell and select yes, not no, and that should work. We should now have an icon on a launch screen, and we'll see that if we build and run later. Next up, I asked the students to create a model file named friend that's going to contain a struct called friend with the following criteria. It's got to be codable and identifiable. It's got to have an ID property that's going to conform to identifiable, and this should be declared, but it should not be initialized. It should be a string value that could be nil as well. So that's a string question mark or an optional value, string value. Then we're going to have 3 more properties in there, name, bringing, and notes, and those are all string values, and we should initialize those to empty strings. And I just point out that the name is the name of the friend, bringing is what they're bringing, and notes are any special notes. So I'm going to add this file right underneath my app file. So I'm going to right click on my FriendsGiving app file. I'm going to select new file. This is going to be a Swift file, not a Swift UI view. We name the file friend with a capital F. Then we'll declare the struct with struct, capital F friend, colon, and that's identifiable, comma, and codable, open and close curlies. And we'll declare our ID property, but we won't initialize it, var ID, colon, capital S string, question mark, because it could be nil. And we're going to use that fact to our advantage when we create a function to be able to save a value. We're either going to append it to the end and create an ID for this if it's a brand new friend, or if it's an existing friend, we should have an ID in there, and we'll just update the existing one. Then below this, we'll declare var name equals empty string, var bringing equals empty string, and var notes equals empty string. And oh yeah, I forgot to rename the content view to list view. So we'll head over to content view. I'll highlight this, refactor, rename. Then I'll change the name of the struct to list view. And this is totally fine, but I like to highlight, copy the list view name and also change the comment up above. And I don't have to change the name of the preview provider, but I like to put list view down here as well. Even if I didn't do that, the preview provider would work though. So now we're going to go ahead and we are going to create a view model. Name it FriendsViewModel, properly set up the class so that it'll act like an MVVM view model, publish a property named friends that's an array of friend structs, initialize it to an empty array, initialize an object of this class named FriendsVM, and set it up as an environment object, and we know to do that in the FriendsGiving app. It's the first executing Swift file in our project, and wherever we need to work with the environment object, we also know how to do that, so we'll be doing that as we set up the rest of the project. We'll create that right underneath the friend. So I'm going to right click on friend, select new file. This is going to be a Swift file, and we'll call this friends view model, upper camel case. Then we'll set this up with class, friends view model, upper camel case, colon. This is always observable object, open and close curlies, and that published value we want at published var lowercase friends, colon, brackets inside here, capital friend, that struct we created, equals empty bracket. So we've initialized the friends as an array of friend, but it initially has nothing inside it. And now let's head over to the FriendsGiving app file, and we're going to set up the environment object. Remember, the first thing we need to do though is to initialize this object. We're using the @state object property, so we'll do that right underneath the struct. And we follow that with var friendsVM equals friendsViewModel, open and close parens. Now we also want to remember to add the .environment object modifier below the list view in the window group here, and in between the parentheses, we're going to pass in the friends VM object we just created. So now we've initialized our environment object and we've passed it into the hierarchy. Next up, we want to create a detail view. We want it to look exactly like this. This is where you're going to either edit a friend or you're going to update an existing friend. So we need to create a VStack to do this. We're going to left align things with default padding. We're going to have 3 text views and 3 text fields. We see them in here for name, bringing, and notes. The text view should be bold and they should contain the text name colon, bringing colon, or notes colon respectively. And the text field should have just the placeholder indicators inside of them indicating that they're next, bringing, and notes also respectively. They should be rounded border text field style, and we should have padding below the text field. This layout on the right shows how things should look. We should also include a navigation bar with a cancel button in the left and a save button on the right. Clicking on either one should dismiss, although we'll eventually add some code to save when we click on the save button. And also the back button in the navigation bar should not show since we've got a save and cancel button here. So I'll create the detail view below the list view, right click on list view, select new file. This is a Swift UI view. I'm going to name this file detail view. And I'll delete the default text view that I get, and I'll create a VStack with an alignment parameter, passing in .leading so everything is left justified. And in between the curlies, I'll add a text view. The first text view property is going to have the string capital N name with a colon in here, and I'm going to put .bold as a modifier below this. Then I need a text field, and oh yeah, I'm going to select this option with the title key and the text, but I need to create a state variable of type friend, which has got all the properties that I need to enter the data in this detail view. So up top, I'll say @state var lowercase f friend colon uppercase f friend. We're not going to initialize this because we're going to pass it over from the list view. Then back in the text field, we'll select the option with the title key and the text. The title key is just going to be the string lowercase n name. Tab over to the text. This is a binding variable, so this is going to be $friend.name. Then I'll set the text field style to .rounded border. Below this, I'll set .padding to .bottom, but I can see that I'm getting an error down here in my preview provider. I'm going to backspace and change my detail view. Now I need to pass in a friend. So for the friend value, I'm just going to say capital F friend, open and close parens. And we are going to take advantage of the environment object in here. So below this, I'm going to say .environment object, and I'm going to pass in friends view model, open and close paren. Then I can highlight the text field and text view that I created, copy this, paste it down below twice, and update this second value so it reflects bringing, my other property, and below that I want to reflect notes, the other property. And we're supposed to add standard padding to the VStack, and we'll add a spacer inside the VStack to push all the text and text fields to the top. Now we're going to inherit the navigation stack from the previous view, the list view, but to get the navigation stack to show up so we can see the navigation bar we're about to enter in the preview provider, we need to add a navigation stack to the preview provider. So I'll do that here, and then I'll make sure that I've got my detail view and its modifier inside that little navigation stack. Then below the dot padding in the V stack, we can create a dot toolbar modifier with a content, open and close curlies. Inside here, we'll say toolbar item with placement. The placement's going to be dot cancellation action. We'll add a button with the title cancel. And oh yeah, we're going to have to create an environment object for dismiss. So we'll do that up top. We say at environment in between parentheses / dot dismiss private var dismiss. Then back in the button action for the cancel action, we'll just say dismiss, but make sure you add the open and close parens. Then I'm going to highlight the toolbar item, copy it, paste it down below. I'm going to change my placement from cancellation action to dot navigation bar trailing, and I'm going to change the label to, or the title I should say, to save, and I'll just put a to-do comment in here saying we eventually need to add some save code here. But we've got our toolbar and that's looking good. And we also want to make sure that we hide that back button. We don't need that if we have cancel and save. So just before the third curly from the end, I'm going to say dot navigation bar back button hidden, and the default here is for this to be true. Next, we're going to head back to the list view and we'll make some edits so that we get a navigation bar with the title friends, a button in the upper right with a plus in the system image. We're going to click on the plus button to present the detail view in a sheet. So that's what the plus button will do. It should have an empty friend inside of that. Now we'll eventually also want to have a list that will show all of the friends that we have in our FriendsGiving. This list should be plain style. Each element in the list should navigate to the detail view when it's tapped, passing in the friend that was tapped on. That should show up in the detail view. Each element in the list should also display the friend's name in a Title II font and the item that they're bringing in the callout font. And this name and bringing value should be left justified. So over here on the right-hand side, it shows you exactly how things should look if we set this up. Let's do it. So let's head back over to the list view. And I'll delete everything that's inside the body here and start off with a navigation stack. And then below this, I'll say dot navigation title, setting that equal to the string friends. Then in between the navigation stack curlies, I'm going to add a list, open and close curlies. And then inside of this, I'm going to put a for each. And I want to use a for each here because I'm eventually going to have on delete and on move. Remember, those don't work on just the list. You've got to add them to a for each. And now this for each is going to iterate through our friends that are in our environment object. So we need to set up our environment object above. So I'll say at environment object var friends vm colon capital friends view model. So this will give me access to the view model. And since I'm eventually going to present a sheet, I should get a variable for that too. With at state private var, we'll call this sheet is presented and set this equal to false. Then down here in the for each, we can go ahead and use our data and content. We don't need an ID because we conform to identifiable. And the data is going to be friendsvm.friends. And over in our content, we'll pass in friend. And after the in keyword in the code, we're going to have two text fields in a VStack aligned to the left. So we'll say VStack with an alignment colon of dot leading, open and close curlies. And in there, we'll add a text view, passing in friend.name, setting the dot font to dot title 2. And under that, a text view of friend.bringing, setting the dot font to dot callout. And I'm getting this gnarly error up here, which is not very friendly. It's not easy to figure out what's going on, but I've warned my students that this is the kind of error that shows up if you don't have your preview provider set up properly. Specifically, we haven't passed in our environment object, so that's why this error is occurring. It actually is not going to crash our code, so we could go ahead and run in our simulator and everything would work fine. But down here in the preview provider, I'm just going to add just below the list view here, dot environment object, and I'm going to pass in a friends view model, open and close parens. Now inside the for each, remember we want each of these items to be inside of a navigation link. So I'll enter a navigation link with destination and label, press return for trailing closures. I'm going to highlight this whole VStack here, cut it out, and I'm going to paste that in for my label. And then in the curlies for the destination, I'm going to say detail view, and I need to pass in a friend, but that's just going to be friend. And I notice my navigation title isn't showing up in the right place. That's because I put it after the navigation stack. Remember, it's got to be inside the navigation stack's curlies. That's just like toolbars. And speaking of toolbars, just below this, we'll say dot toolbar with content, press return for trailing closure. And below this, we'll add a toolbar item with placement. The placement's going to be .navigation bar leading. And in between the curlies, we'll pass in edit button, open and close parens. Remember, that's the button that's going to allow us to get the delete and the move markers. But then I'm going to highlight this toolbar item, copy it, paste it down below. I'm going to change my placement to navigation bar trailing. And I'll add a button with an action and a label. And for the label, I'll add an image with system name in double quotes, the string plus, all lowercase. And the action, if you click on the plus button, it's going to show the sheet. And the way that we do that is we just say sheet is presented .toggle, but we need to add our sheet modifier down below. Now I can do that after my navigation stack. So I'm going to code fold my navigation stack so I can be sure where I'm putting this. And I'll say .sheet. I'm going to select the option with is presented and content. The is presented is got to be a binding value. So that's the $sheet is presented, the variable we created above. And inside this, we're going to create a navigation stack with open and close curlies first. And we need to do that because we're about to present the detail view. And when we present in a sheet, we don't inherit the navigation stack that we would normally get if we clicked on a navigation link. And so inside of this, just to navigate through, we don't add a navigation link. We just say detail view, and in parens, we'll pass in capital F friend, open and close parens, because it's going to be an empty friend. We're adding a brand new friend here when we click on the plus button. So now I can unfold my code for my navigation stack, click on the plus button, and I can see the sheet is presenting. This is looking good. Cancel gets me back, and we're ready to move on. So then in detail view, clicking on the save button when we add a new friend to the list should save that friend, appending them to the bottom of the view model's list of friends, while clicking on save when editing a friend that was previously added should edit the friend in the proper location in the friends array. So this is going to function just like the to-do list app that we created, and my students have also worked on other apps in class when we've met that do the same thing. After that save, the screen should navigate back to our list view. And I specifically ask to use the MVVM approach when creating the save functionality, and to do this with a function named saveFriend that we should include inside of the friends view model. So let's set this up. We'll head back to the friends view model class, and we'll create our function with func saveFriend. We'll pass in a friend that we'll call lowercase friend, colon, that's of type uppercase friend, open and close curlies. And then first we're going to see if we should add a new friend. Now a new friend comes in here without an ID property. So we'll check to see if it has an ID property. If it does not, then we'll create an ID property and we'll append it to the end of the friends array. So we're going to say if friend.id equals nil, open and close parens. Again, that means this is a new friend to append. So for this new friend that we create, we also need to create an ID for it before we append. And we'll do that with var new friend equals friend. Again, we have to do this because the friend that we pass in here is a constant and we can't make a change to the struct, but new friend is a variable. So we can say new friend.id equals uuid, open and close parens, .uuid string. And then below this, we simply say friends.append, and we'll pass in new friend. Otherwise, else, open and close curlies. In the else clause, this is an existing friend that we're editing, so we need to find the index to update. Then we can modify the element at that index. So the way we find the index is we can say if let index equals friends.first index where, and then we're going to put a closure in here with open and close curlies. Then we'll say $0.ID. So the $0 represents each element as we iterate through friends. So from element 0, 1, 2, 3, however many they are, that's going to be in $0. We're going to get the ID property. So we'll look at its ID property and we'll check to see if it equals to friends.id. Oh, it should be friends.id. It should be friend.id. That's the friend that we passed in. So that will find the index of the friend we passed in that we want to modify. Then if we've got this index, all we need to do is say friends and in between square brackets index equals our friend that we passed in. Nice. Now let's go ahead and call this in our detail view. So I'll delete my to-do comment in here, and I want to refer to FriendsVM, and I didn't set up my environment object, so I need to do that up top, just underneath my struct definition. We do that with @environment object var FriendsVM : friendsViewModel. Then down below, friendsVM.saveFriend. We need to pass in a friend, and that's simply going to be friend. That's the state variable specific to this view that has all of the different elements that we enter into our text fields. And so now let's go ahead and build and run in the simulator. We see all our buddies on our launch screen. Oh, and I'm remembering there's one more thing we forgot to add. We need to set our navigation bar title display mode to inline so we don't get a big space at the top of this view. So underneath the navigation bar back button hidden, we'll say dot navigation bar button display mode, set that to dot inline. Now we can build and run. Let's click on that plus button. We'll add Baby Yoda. He's going to bring frogs. Don't let him sit next to Moff Gideon. Click on save, and it saves this element to the end of the array, but unfortunately we forgot to set our list view style to plain. That was requested in the test. Super easy to fix though. We'll head into our list view. I can do that right in front of our navigation title, setting that equal to friends, and we'll set .list style equals .plain. Now build and run, click on plus, and we'll add Prof G. He's going to bring the turkey. He's a good cook. Save this. That element's added. Perfect. We're going to go ahead and add another one. Baby Yoda is going to bring frogs. Don't let him sit next to Moff Gideon. Click save. That's added to the array as well. It's in the list. Nice. What about editing? Let's click on Prof G, and we'll change him from bringing turkey to turkey and whatnot. Click on save. There it is in the list. Looking good. And so now we're ready to finish things up. So it says in the list view that we should add the functioning edit button to the top of the navigation bar. We already have the button there, but it doesn't function yet. So using an MVVM approach, we should add a method to delete an element of the list when swiping left or editing using the edit button feature. The delete method should be named delete friend, and we should have that in our friends view model. And we should also use the same MVVM approach for move. We should add a function called move friend, and that should also be in the friends view model. And then finally, we should have a play sound function, and we should do everything necessary to play the gobble sound on startup and only when the app starts up. Now, I also mentioned down below there's no need to add saving or loading functionality in this app, but you should know how to do this. The reason why I didn't ask you to do this is because we've got a whole other app to build, but I might ask you to do this on the final, and in fact, as a bonus, I'm going to show you how to do that just to make sure everybody knows. And if you're reviewing this, you can test yourself on that as well. So let's go ahead and finish this up. So I like to set up the on delete and on move first inside of my view, and then I move them over into the view model and create functions so it's more MVVM. So I'll start out just below our for each. Remember, that's where we add on delete and on move. And I'll say dot on delete. We only get one option here with the perform. Press return to accept that. We'll return for the closure format, and notice we're passing an index set in here. And down below this, we're going to use a special Swift UI method to remove elements from an array. So we'll say friendsVM.friends, that's our array, dot remove, and select this option with @offsets. Notice this takes an index set, and iOS is going to call this on delete function whenever we swipe left or whenever we click on the delete indicator when we're in edit mode. So we get what we need in here, and I'm just going to copy the name @offsets, and I'm going to use that as the value that we pass in here, and I'm also going to pass that directly into the remove method. So that code I just wrote will work, it's just not very MVVM. But below this, we'll also add our onMove function. Again, there's only one option, perform, press return. We have two values that are passed in here. One's an index set, one's an integer, and you guessed it, we also have a special move method in Swift UI that can move elements of an array. So we'll get that with friendsVM.friends.move. There's only one option here with from offsets, which is an index set, and to offset, which is an int. And just like before, I'm going to take the label for the parameter here from offsets. I'm going to use that as the name for the value I'm passing in, and then I'm going to pass that directly into the move function, and I'm going to do the same with to offset as well. Then I'll highlight these two functions, I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to paste them into my friend view model just to use as templates, but I've got to create functions, remember, my friend delete and my friend move. So I'll head over to the friends view model, and below my save friend function, I'm going to paste in those two modifier blocks that I copied. Now again, these aren't going to work, but I'll create a new delete function with func delete friend, open and close parens, open and close curlies, and then I'll copy the line with the remove offsets in here. This is what I want to be inside my delete friends function, so I'm going to paste that in. But I don't need friends VM out front because I'm already in my view model class, so I'll delete that. And we want to pass in this @offsets value, so I'm going to copy that, put it between parens, put in a colon, and remember this is going to be an index set. So that's one function created. I can delete on delete, and now I want to do the same thing with a move friend function. So I'll say func move friend, open and close parens, open and close curlies. I'll highlight and cut out everything on the line inside of the onMove modifier here, except for the friends VM dot. Paste that in there. That's exactly what I want to call in my move friend function. Now remember, we also want to pass in the from offsets and to offset. So I'm just going to copy these two values here, paste them between my parentheses. So these are good for the labels, but I also need to set what type these are. So after from offsets, I'll say colon, and this is an index set. After to offset, I'm going to say colon, this is an int. Then I can delete this onMove modifier code. I don't need that anymore, and we can call these two functions back from our list view. So I'm going to use the simplified form of calling onDelete. So just above the onDelete I have here, I'm going to enter onDelete again. We'll delete the other one in just a bit. Select this option with perform. Rather than press return for the trailing closure format, what I'm going to do instead is just enter friendsVM.friends. And we'll call delete friend. And remember that weird shorthand that we can use after delete friend, since we're passing in at offsets here, and that's what we get from the onDelete function. We can actually delete this parentheses that follow the delete friend and everything that's inside of it. I'm not a big fan of that shorthand. I don't think it explicitly says that delete friend is a method. I think that this actually makes it look like it's some kind of property now, but you're going to see lots of developers use this shorthand format, so we use it here. Now I don't need this .onDelete modifier, so I can get rid of that. I've simplified my code, but below this I'm going to say .onMove. Again, select this option with perform, but don't press return, and we'll pass in friendsVM.moveFriend, but we don't need what's in the parentheses here. We can delete that for the shorthand format and delete onMove. And with this, my friends, we're done. However, before we build and run, I promised you that I would also show you how we can add save and load functionality here so that we are saving and loading our data to our device. Let's head back to our Friends view model and we'll add those functions now. So just before the end of this class, I'm going to create a new function with private func save data, and we're only going to call save data from inside of this class. So that's why I can make this private out front. That just means that I'm never going to have save data show up, and that's actually a good thing to do because I won't confuse that with the other function that I wrote that has save in the name, that's save friend. And we pass nothing in here, so open and close parens, open and close curlies. Then inside the curlies, we're going to say let path equals capital URL dot documents directory dot appending. We want to select this option here with component, not components, plural, component, singular. And then we just give a name of the file that we want to save on the device. And I usually name the file the same as the variable that contains data that we're going to save. So we're going to call this lowercase friends. Now that we got our path, let's go ahead and try to encode the data that's inside of our friends variable into data before we can save it. So we'll say let data equals try question mark JSON encoder open and close parens dot encode, and we're going to pass in friends here. Now this could throw an error, but if it does, we'll just ignore it. But we do have the try out front. That's why we have try question mark. But down below, we're going to have another statement that could throw an error. So we'll say do open and close parens catch open and close parens. In the do clause, this is where we try to write the data to our device. So we'll say try data question mark dot write to, and we're going to pass in the path. So that's the directory location plus the name friends at the end, which is where hopefully we're going to be saving the JSON that we just encoded into data. If this works, awesome. If it doesn't and we throw the error, then down in the catch clause, we'll say print angry emoji error could not save data. And that's our save function. So now let's go ahead and create a load data function too. This does just the opposite. It loads the data that we already saved to our device. So this is also going to be a private func load data open and close parens, open and close curlies. We need to get a path, so we'll do the same line we did down here, the let path equals URL dot documents directory dot appending components colon. And remember, we're going to be loading from the path that has friends, the same name that we used when we saved. And I copied and pasted too much in here. I don't need the .let data line in here because we're not encoding here. In fact, we're going to decode in just a bit. But before we do that, we try to see if we can get the data from our path. So we say guard let data equals try question mark capital D data, selecting the option with contents of. That's going to be the path. So we're going to go into the path. So we read the contents of the path and we try to put it in this data constant. Either we're going to get a value that we put in data, otherwise we'll get nil. So we'll say else open and close curly. After this, we want to return if this does not work. And you know what? Let's print out an error statement just before the return here. And oh, it looks like I got my curlies messed up here. Let me fix these with some deletions and Command A, Control I. Now everything looks good. And I'm just going to copy the error message from my catch down here and put it above the return statement. but I'll modify this to say could not read data from path, string interp path. But then if this works, we're going to have a do catch clause down below. And in the do, this is where we try to decode the data that we just read from our path. So we'll say friends, remember we're trying to put that in the friends value, equals try JSON decoder, decoder, open and close parens, dot decode. We're going to pass in the option with a type and the from. The type is going to be an array of friends. See how friends up here is an array of friend types? Now you can actually write this a couple of different ways. I actually prefer to say in brackets capital F friend dot self, but there's another option that I showed you in one of our learning videos as well. That's capital A array, and then with pointy brackets here, the less than greater than symbol in between, you put in friend. And again, we don't usually use this notation in our code, so that's why I prefer bracket, capital friend bracket, but you have to have the dot self afterward. Then tab over to data, and this is just lowercase data. That's the value that we get in our guard statement if that guard statement works and doesn't return nil. Then for our catch clause, I'll copy the error statement, paste it down below, but change this so that it reads could not decode data. And now we need to call these functions when we need them. When are we going to load data? Well, when we initialize this view model. We want to go onto our device. We want to grab that data that's in the path, convert it into a value that we can put inside of our friends property of this class. So let's create an initializer up top. Right after the publish property, I'm going to say init, open and close parens, open and close curlies, and call load data. That's it. So whenever we call that state object, remember in our app file, that's going to go ahead and load anything that's on disk. And by the way, if there's nothing in a path file, then we're going to get an error, but it's not going to crash our app. And that's going to happen the very first time we run our app because we don't have a file. When we first run our app, we haven't saved anything yet. Now, what about save data? When do we want to call that? Well, whenever we've made a change to our data. So inside the save friend function, we're going to call save data just before we end. And we're going to do the same thing in our delete friend function, and we'll do the same thing in our move friend function. And that, my friend, should be it. A working correct exam answer. Let's go ahead, take a look back at our list view. You know, I think everything is looking good. Why don't we just go ahead and build and run? We've got our empty app. And by the way, down here in the console, you get this error, could not read data from path. And that's because it's the first time we're running this and we don't have any data on path because we didn't save anything. So even though you get an error here, that's totally fine, totally expected. But let's head back and add some data. So we'll add Prof G. He's going to bring the turkey. He's a boss cook. Save that. Looks like we saved it. Add another person. We'll add the Mandalorian. He's going to bring a Beskar steel baking dish. Let's add Grogu. He's going to bring frogs. Again, don't let him sit next to Moff Gideon. We'll invite Beyonce. She says she's going to bring Red Lobster biscuits. We'll click on edit. We'll move Beyonce to the top. Queen Bee's at the top. We can swipe to delete the Mandalorian just to see if things are working. Why don't we head into Prof G here and we'll change that to Prof Gallagher. Save that. Then I'll head back to Xcode, press the stop button, but build and run again. And look at this. All my data is in here when I run again. The save and load is working perfectly. Swifter, I hope you got this right, but if you didn't get this right, I hope this explanation helped make things clear so you can dominate questions like this if they appear on the final exam. Continue to hack!